Texas, Milton Bates, Professor Emeritus from Marquette University, and now a prize-winning member of the Poetry Society of Michigan, and John Otley, past president of the Poetry Society of Georgia and past treasurer of NFSPS. We have two wonderful winners, and this year, happily, both of them are here with us tonight to share their poetry. You may have noticed their prize-winning chapbooks on the table as you came in. These books are for sale. They are the poet's own copies and are available for purchase from them, and you can get them to sign them for $5 each. If you happen to pick up one, it was not intended as a freebie, but as an enticement for purchase. But the further enticement for purchase is going to be hearing them read from these chapbooks. They'll give you a taste, 4 or 5 poems each. And I'm going to give you a wee introduction of each one before she or he reads. And first we'll hear from Lisa Levin from the University of California, Berkeley, who has won the Edna Might Memorial Award for her manuscript, now a chapbook, Fireworks and My City is Ashes. Lisa has in fact just graduated from UC Berkeley, where she received a degree in comparative literature and narrative art. She was born in Tokyo. Her family now lives in San Diego. And as I have read through the poems and designing the chapbooks, I'll give you a little sense of how I've read them. It seems to me that all the poems are shaped by Japanese and Japanese-American culture, both in content and in form. They bring together witness accounts of the experience of Japanese and Japanese-American civilians in World War II with what I take to be personal experience in present-day America with its foreign wars. These are poems that gain power by their restraint and by conveying emotion through the clear presentation of images. Lisa Levin.
Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you everyone for having me here today. It's an honor to be able to join you and to be able to share my work with you, so thank you so much. Before I start reading, I just wanted to give a quick overview of a little bit of background on how I got started with my, sorry, I'm a little bit taller than usual. I'm wearing 3-inch heels, so cheating. So a little bit of background. This started as an exploration of my family history. My father is Jewish American and my mother is Japanese, so I'm Japanese American. The Second World War was always of great interest to me because I feel like it left emotional scars and created tensions between the two sides of my family, and I wanted to explore that. And fortunately, I was very lucky and I received funding to do this research. So I spent 2 summers ago, I traveled for 3 months to cities that were important to my relatives during and directly after the war. So I was in Krakow, Paris, Boston, New York, Tokyo, and I was interviewing relatives about the war. I visited memorials and museums, and I read obsessively, I mean more obsessively than usual, just got something. And as I was doing all this, I I wanted to do more than just looking into myself and looking at my family. I wanted to explore the larger themes of war, of power, of oppression, and of nationalism and the dangers of that. So the first poem that I wanted to share with you comes from my reflections on the legacy of Japanese imperialism during the war. And even if the war might seem like ancient history to a lot of people, it was very recent, and the effects were very real and very tangible today. Fascism still exists in Japan, and sympathy for right-wing movements is still there, as in many other countries. So it's important to understand the history of these ideologies and be very aware and critical. So the first poem that I'm going to read is called The Sun. The sun. His feathers melted into the sea. He fell into a warship. The sun was too much for him. Not its heat, but the rhetoric of its rising for our nation first, before any other eyes could wake to its bayonet rays. The gods would not bring him back to me, as I was the one who knelt by the boy before taking flight and whispered, home. They enshrined my son. Young men honor his ghost, and I worried they want to touch glory as he wanted, reaching to grasp the star their fathers instructed them to worship. The Japanese side of my family was lucky because my grandfather was too young to fight in the war, and everyone survived the Tokyo fire bombings. But that's not to say that it wasn't a terrifying experience. The firebombing in one day killed more people than the atomic bombing in Hiroshima. And my grandmother witnessed this, and she was telling me that she remembers seeing the flames falling from the sky and admiring them because they looked like fireworks. And I also have a neighbor who remembers her mother running frantically through a field of corpses, touching dead face after dead face, wondering if her son was there because he had gone missing. So the next poem is called Epithet, and although the speaker is talking about her grandfather, for me, I intended it to be more about the collective trauma of war and not just about the individual suffering. Epithet. My grandfather's lungs were tired. His laugh was hazy. He fought fires during the war. He wouldn't quit cigarettes after he saw something black collapse under the skeleton of his brother's bicycle after the air raids. Even when I got into the habit of hiding them, he wouldn't quit. Once, he caught me sneaking a pack into the cupboard, so he took my hand into his and said he'd put out a cigarette in my palm, his worn face leaning in close, shaken, a memory that lives on my tongue as vividly as the smell of spring. My parents and I moved from Tokyo to San Diego when I was 2, and I spent my childhood going back and forth between the two countries, and I grew up speaking both languages, which was quite the blessing, because it gives me different modes of communicating, different ways of thinking, but it also creates a complication in looking for how to reveal my true self and what language is, what kind of speech to use to show myself and to be free. So something I was experimenting with recently is the use of Japanese poetic forms in English language, mostly free verse. These are all approximations because I don't think it's quite possible to really do a haiku, an actual haiku in English. But this next one that I'm going to read is called Post-Breakup Haiku, and it's a collection of a few different haiku that are woven together. Post-Breakup Haiku. Butterflies drift past my windowsill without flowers. Crickets in my backyard, inaudible beneath Fleetwood Mac. The curve of her laugh line, crescent moon. 20 missed calls and counting the seconds between lightning and thunder. Cold night. I woke up to find I'd stolen all the sheets from no one. And this final one is a tanka series, and my approach was similar. Tanka is like haiku. A haiku is 575. Tanka is 57577. So it's slightly longer and it leaves more space for the lyrical I to speak, for a little bit more emotion to come through. And since this chapbook is dedicated to my younger brother, I'm going to read this poem that is about a brother and sister. It's called Early Autumn. Today begins with fog, flowering whorls of breadloaf lupine. Our world is aging. While I wait for my toast, I heat the kettle and wonder if my brother is wearing my scarf. I knitted it before I moved up north. He followed 2 years later in our old pickup. Like a flock, our parents said. Every week we send them postcards with birds. Albatross, cattle egret, a family on our fridge. He lives alone, 2 potted plants, and a rattly heater. He's used to the cold by now. He's used to all sorts of pain by now. He's in the military, shined boots, buzzed hair. Fig jam, Earl Grey, me at my desk with a half-filled notebook. Today is a good day to write. Write of how I dreamt of us flying across California skies. We were children and the world cloudless.
Thank you so much for that beautiful reading, Lisa. The winner of the Florence Kahn Memorial Award is Ian C. Williams. He has just graduated from Fairmont State University in West Virginia with a major in English education. And he and his wife, who is also here, have just bought their first house in Fairmont. So they're in the midst of an exciting time. His book is called House of Bones. And this is, to my reading, this is a book of poems that convey restlessness and uneasiness. They do it with vivid images of the physical body. They do it with thick textures of sound. And they do it with verbs that don't necessarily come together to give us a narrative or a description of setting, but they may point like vectors in all different directions. This uneasiness seems to be partly socioeconomic. It's the uneasiness of a white-collar generation that literally paces on the foundations that their fathers physically laid. But more fundamentally, it's existential. It's the uneasiness of a mind inside a body and the consciousness of what happens to the body and the life inside it. Ian Williams.
Thank you. When I was drafting this chapbook, it was after the prompting of my academic advisor who said, "Here's a writing opportunity for you." And I thought, why not? Wasn't expecting I was going to be here. So, I am. So when I was given the prospect of writing a 10-poem chapbook, the topic came to mind: what am I going to write about? What am I going to spend 10 poems discussing? And as mentioned, I did just buy a house, and I'm working on moving from the student part of my life into the professional part of my life, and in that growing period, this idea of growing up. And as I've been going through that journey, the big question has been, what is it to grow up? What is it to be a man? What is that idea of what masculine is? And so, as I was looking at this book, it's really a really big deconstruction of what masculinity is, what it is to be a man, what it is to exist in this world that we live in now as compared to what masculinity was in the past, so on and so forth, how it all worked out. Which brings me to the first poem in the chapbook called Deconstructivist, which I feel is a pretty good starting point for the other poems in the collection. So, Deconstructivist. In old photographs, a man is always just a man, solidly, struck against the negative, still, secure, stationary, but wrapped in the clothes of a stanza. He is never simple, never just man. Reduced, a symbol, deconstructed to individual parts, strewn across a planting field, arranged in rows, each appendage, thought a seed. Man becomes fragmented, collections sewn disjointedly, limbs dance to dissimilar rhythms, with each piece pinned to reels presented independently of others. A sunken gut struggles to find its legs. The next poem that I want to read is called Exodus. And if you decide to read the whole chapbook, you'll notice that I am very fond of using biblical imagery throughout the course of my writing. And in the Bible, when the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, the bones of Joseph, who was made Pharaoh at the time, were collected there. And when Moses eventually led his people out of Egypt, they took the bones of Joseph with them, because Joseph wanted to be buried in the land of his people, not in Egypt. And so, as I was looking through that, I was thinking about how those kind of themes work in the contemporary context, and how that kind of idea of heritage and belonging worked, and that kind of informed this poem. At one time or another, you lived, with skin stringing your limbs together. I saw the cross-hatched scars where sand struck your calloused profile, where heat shriveled, thirsty pores. At that time, you spoke of better days approaching. I carry your bones, collection of naked branches, dried like kindling, sycamore sticks in a canvas coffin. I'll bear your remnants through subway systems, narrow alleys, beyond civilization. I'll bury your paper skeleton, a quiet archaeology before I rest. Also, as mentioned, the type of work that is traditionally masculine has changed over time. As I at plowing fields and doing manly work, the stuff that puts hair on your chest. And it really got me thinking about what work is, what I consider to be work, and what other people have considered to be work as time has gone on. And that brought on this poem, Work Ethics. A change of pace, the transition from breathing stale air to swallowing the thin chill of winter, whistling through the weeping willows, sifting faded Polaroids, aging orange and indigo, faces, fathers and fathers before, wearing the cartilage away in cornfields, coal mines, as their sons try justifying holding down desks, crunching accounts, mothers arthritic fingers still, mending worn denim thread, stretched up, gaze diligent, pulling the weight of family like the needle past canvas, calloused knuckles, churn the Iowan crust as younger joints adjust vectors and pick Pantone swatches. Constructing dry-walled offices 3 stories above earth turned by grandfathers, pacing the foundations they poured, we wonder whether we have one of our own. The last poem I want to share with you is called An Aging Iris, and much like the rest of the manuscript, it talks a lot about time, and it talks a lot about aging, and it talks a lot about what it is to grow up. My father, as he's grown older, he tells me that he'll look in the mirror and he'll see 19-year-old eyes staring back at him, and he just wonders where the time went. And so that thought always struck me, and I always think, well, when I'm my father's age and I have children of my own, will I have that same revelation to see the eyes I see myself now? Will I see those then? That brought an aging iris. I reached the point that I've stopped growing. My bones have hardened, my hands have lost the round glow of youth. I stopped feeling older at 19. Over the years, skin around my knuckles cracked like crow's feet in desert soil. This tumbleweed beard fades into silver follicles. Only eyes remain the oasis shade familiar to me. Still 19, staring back, afraid of becoming old.